With the release of Metroid Dread, this seems like the perfect time to drop some more Samus on this channel. Naturally, I can't cover glitches right away on a game that was just released, but I can cover glitches on the one that came before it, that being Metroid 4, better known as Metroid Fusion. Despite launching a staggering 19 years before Dread, the events of Fusion are hugely influential on every Metroid game that will follow it, so this GBA game from 2002 remains as impressive and relevant today as ever. Fusion's obvious departure from the open-world formula of most other Metroid games in favor of a linear narrative makes it a more difficult game to exploit overall, but that doesn't make it a bad game by any means. On the contrary, it's my personal favorite, and I think you'll be surprised to learn what we can pull off, despite Nintendo's best efforts to the contrary. Suit up. When you begin the game, the first choice you'll be offered to make is which save file to start on, at which point you should pick save slot C. Seriously, this isn't a joke. This is a requirement to execute one of the glitches later on, and it doesn't affect any of the others, so just start on C and forget about it for now. I'll go deeper into why this is necessary when we reach that point. The opening cinematic will play, showing Samus becoming infected by X-parasites, being cured by the Metroid cell, and getting the fusion suit. You'll then land on the BSL research station, see the reveal of the SAX, and be sent into Sector 1, the first area of the station the X infiltrate. Your job here is to clear the sensitive atmospheric life support infrastructure before the X can destroy it, which naturally means blasting box fans with explosives. Eventually you'll come to a room with a charge beam core X imitating a Chozo statue, where we can perform our first exploit. Shoot the statue to make the core X aggressive, and then jump up onto one of the above platforms. By leading the boss just right, you can get it pinned under the platform in such a way that its eye is exposed, but it can never shoot you. Then by just jumping and firing missiles downward, you can guarantee your kill without ever taking a hit. If you've ever seen a Metroid Fusion speedrun, you know this trick is standard practice for runners. Grab the charge beam and head off for the final stabilizer. There's another small glitch we can pull off in this room too, actually. In order to clear the stabilizer normally, you're supposed to pass all the way through to the left side of the room and use missiles to blast through the wall in order to clear a path to the open side of the fan. And while Samus will take damage and be knocked backward if she touches the protected sides of the stabilizer, these things don't actually have collision themselves. What this means is that by touching it and taking damage, you can actually clip the tip of Samus's gun inside it while still within iframes, and take it out with point-blank shots from the wrong side. The circular flare that is released with a charge beam shot even inflicts its own damage, so not only is this method faster than doing it the intended way, it's stronger too. Both of these so far have admittedly been pretty minor, and some might say fall short of the true definition of glitch. You want to see a situation in which Nintendo made an obvious mistake, right? Fair enough. Now let's move on to Sector 6. You will encounter the SAX for the second time here, in a corridor filled with power bomb blocks that you can't break yet. You're supposed to hide underneath the floor and wait for the SAX to destroy them for you, but if you aren't a big fan of hiding, you could also just phase through the wall. This is an out-of-bounds exploit you can do in tons of locations in Metroid Fusion. All you need to do is morph ball jump into a breakaway block just as it's reforming. The timing on this is very precise, but the bigger issue in most situations is getting back inbounds once you pull it off. Luckily here, the wall is only a few tiles thick, so if you go out of bounds using this breakaway tile and hold right, it's possible to have the game eject you on the opposite side of the wall we started on, making the SAX encounter here completely skippable. Who says we need power bombs? Almost immediately after, you'll encounter the giant core X that holds the Varia suit. This boss is immune to all weapons aside from the charge beam, and has a shield of rotating smaller X protecting it that you're meant to destroy first. Just like with the atmospheric stabilizer in Sector 1, by clipping into the boss, you can fire a point-blank charge beam to bypass the shield entirely and deal extra damage with the flare. Once you defeat it and obtain the Varia suit, you'll be sent to Sector 5 to download ice missiles. Before you make it back to the navigation room, red lights will begin flashing and an alarm will sound, which immediately sends you into the depths of Sector 3 in order to prevent the boiler room from overheating. Within the boss room, there's another core X, which this time has wide beam. Just like before, you can pin the boss underneath one of the platforms in this room to make it a sitting duck. Take it out, grab the wide beam upgrade, and head back out of the sector to once again regain access to the main deck and save the animals. As all good Metroid players obviously do. After a quick SAX encounter, the power to the station will be cut and you'll be sent to investigate what is choking the reactor core. Along the way, you will migrate into the depths of Sector 2, where you will have yet another SCX encounter, this time in the form of a long chase sequence in which you have to rapidly open one-way hatches before finally hiding in a dead-end room. Or if you know the spot on the floor you're meant to open with missiles after the chase sequence ends, you can do that now without having to hide. Well, this is awkward. As you make your way deeper into Sector 2, you will eventually encounter the source of the vines entangling the reactor, the plant boss, Notori. It will eventually turn into a Corex, and you'll get the plasma beam. Next, you'll be sent back into Sector 5 for the third and final time to destroy the Nightmare boss and take back the gravity suit. But in doing so, you'll find yourself trapped. With no other path available, you'll be forced to use an underwater speed boost to travel from Sector 5 into the depths of Sector 4. Remember this wall, by the way, because it's important for later. After traveling through a lengthy underwater section, you'll be forced to unlock red security doors to progress and climb up to the surface of Sector 4, where there's another data room. Okay, this is going to take a bit of explaining. In order to reach the exit elevator and return to the main deck, you have to pass by these fish enemies burrowed in the wall that expand and block your path when you get close. They can't be killed by any weapon, so what you're supposed to do is download the Diffusion missile upgrade from the data room to expand the freeze radius on your ice missiles and freeze them while they're small so you can roll through in morph ball form. Then, once you reach the navigation room, the computer admonishes you for opening red hatches without permission and feigns ignorance about the Diffusion missile upgrade that he neglected to mention. This becomes a major plot point later on when Samus learns that the Federation have been withholding upgrades from her on purpose to keep her weak and under their control. So in terms of plot relevance, the Diffusion missiles are pretty important, but from a gameplay perspective, not so much. Remember that wall that we speed boosted through to get here in the first place? Once you've unlocked red security doors, it's possible to boost back through this wall in the opposite direction by carrying it from the green secret hallway found on the map, just underneath the speed boost wall, straight up through an extremely long and complex gauntlet of enemies and ramps, until breaking back through the wall with a diagonal shine spark, and then casually opening the red door on the left side of the room to return to the navigation room through other means, and avoid diffusion missiles entirely. At the risk of stating the obvious, this shine spark chain is an extremely difficult trick, and once you make it back up to the navigation room after doing it, a really cool Easter egg occurs where the computer congratulates Samus for pulling it off by name, and even says, "I wonder how many players will see this message." So yes, Nintendo was definitely aware that skipping diffusion missiles was possible, albeit difficult, and decided to include this secret message as a reward for players that managed to find it, instead of removing the exploit entirely. And while that is a very cool element of Metroid Fusion, it's not really a glitch if Nintendo knew about it, is it? Nope. We aren't done here. Let's rewind all the way back to the data room. We still don't have diffusion missiles at this point, and the only reason that the shine spark chain is necessary in the first place is that you can't get a clear shot on these fish enemies to freeze them, right? Except that you can, and it's not even that difficult. Nintendo was correct to assume that angling a missile diagonally downward wouldn't be enough to freeze the enemy, but what they didn't anticipate was the fact that if you shoot a missile while moving horizontally, the missile will keep Samus's horizontal speed. What that means is that if you space jump in the corner just underneath this platform, and begin moving left just as you fire a missile, its angle will be flatter than usual because it added Samus's horizontal movement speed to its own, and this is just enough to hit the enemy burrowed in the bottom path. So now when you go to the navigation room, the game will see that you made it to this point without diffusion missiles, and just assume that you did the shine spark chain, giving you the secret message as normal. So if you'd like to see the secret message for yourself, I highly recommend trying the ice missile clip first, because it really is much easier. It just goes to show that a glitch's complexity is not always the primary factor for determining if a QA team will find it or not. The Shine Spark exploit was found because the development team was actively looking for Shine Spark exploits, while the missile clip was overlooked, not because it's complicated, but because the development team just didn't think to check for this kind of exploit. Fascinating stuff. From this point on, you mostly complete the game as normal. Grab Wave Beam from the security robot, uncover the secret Metroid breeding program taking place on the facility, get Screw Attack from Ridley, and finally have your showdown with the Omega Metroid. And that's how you finish the game. But that's not the only way. Despite this game's reputation for being restrictively linear, no, we can actually reach the ending with only half of the upgrades and skip over half the bosses. That huge game-breaking glitch that you knew I would throw in at the end of the video? Yeah, this is it. From the moment Metroid Fusion launched in 2002, Speedrunners like Biospark have been trying to find a way to sequence break this game to cut its length down to as little as possible. The problem with this is that Fusion is a narratively driven game, and I mean that in terms of the game's code. Upgrades are flagged as obtainable when the computer tells Samus about them. So even if you use cheats to break into areas that you aren't supposed to enter yet and try to obtain upgrades early, you won't actually accomplish anything. Instead of unlocking the associated upgrade, you just re-unlock whatever the last one you got authentically was. The only way to sequence break Fusion would be to find a way to skip picking up the upgrades entirely. You'd have to find a way to manually rewrite specific variables in the game's code to force the game to progress in the story without Samus having to physically pick anything up. And you might ask, how in the hell could a player possibly rewrite specific variables using nothing but the buttons on a Game Boy? That's impossible. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. But you'd be wrong. If you've seen my video on Super Metroid glitches, you may already be ahead of me here. If through the use of a glitch you manage to force a value into hexadecimal memory that is larger than the maximum number that digit can hold, it overflows into the next digit beside it. Depending on the size of the number that overflows, the second digit may exhibit the same behavior and overflow into the next one beside it. This can have a cascading effect that ripples through memory values like a tidal wave, rewriting each one as it passes. We call this phenomenon memory corruption. The problem, of course, is that this technique isn't precise. You aren't altering individual address values by hand to fit your needs, you're blasting them with a shotgun. The odds of a memory corruption glitch not only succeeding, but then teleporting Samus to the end of Metroid Fusion without crashing the game are infinitesimally small. And by just trying things randomly, there's no way any normal player would ever find this glitch. And that's why they didn't. Fusion's memory corruption glitch was not found, it was designed. In 2018, after 16 years of research and experimentation by speedrunners, Metroid Fusion still did not have a substantial skip of any kind. Even the world record for the game was nothing more than playing through every in-game event as normal, only hyper efficiently. So, Biospark, through the use of data mining and emulator tools that would let him see the game's memory values as he played, found the location of the specific story progression value that he needed to change to make the game think it was time to fight the final boss, and spent months experimenting with ways to corrupt it by dropping power bombs while using the out-of-bounds glitch I showed off earlier. An admirable goal, but an extremely ambitious one, and one that I think most people assumed would ultimately prove to be a waste of time. That is, until April 5th, 2018, when Biospark uploaded a new video to YouTube. Metroid Fusion skipped to the end of the game with memory corruption. He got it, and here's how it works. First, you start a new game as normal, picking save slot C of course, and play through Sector 1. Then as you're leaving the sector to return to the navigation room, save in the save room just before it, and then never save the game again on this file. Saving here writes one of the memory values that we need for later for the memory corruption to be successful. Next, play through Sector 2 normally, get the bombs, get high jump, and then head to Sector 4. You'll need to finish this stage normally as well, but after killing Ceres and exiting the boss room with the speed booster, make sure to bomb this hidden path to the left and break these 2 missile blocks in the wall. Technically, you need to destroy a total of 10 non-respawning blocks in Sector 4, but these are the only 2 that you're likely to miss. Now play through the game all the way to Sector 5 when you get ice missiles and power bombs. Now it's time for the glitch. As you head back up to leave the station, stop in this room and re-enter the room through the hatch on the right until you spawn a waver facing left. This enemy's called a waver, by the way. Then bait it to dive at you and freeze it with an ice missile near the ceiling with a small gap remaining. Lay a power bomb, jump into the small gap between the frozen enemy and the ceiling, and just wait. If you set this up correctly, when the bomb goes off and the enemy dies, it should push Samus out of bounds and into the wall where we can start corrupting memory. Go into Morph Ball form and hold left and A to continuously jump left. Samus isn't actually moving here because she's stuck in the wall, but the game doesn't know that, so this is taking her X and Y coordinates way beyond their intended limits and overflowing into the locations of other memory addresses, which is why you see Samus disappearing and reappearing. Just before Samus reappears for the 4th time, drop a power bomb, but don't let go of left or A. When it goes off, if timed correctly, it will write a 0 into the save room location, which will move your spawn point from the save room in Sector 1 to one that doesn't exist on the main deck. Then, just before Samus reappears on screen for the 12th time, drop another power bomb. This will set the game's event value to 128, a state of the game where the Omega Metroid is already dead and she's ready to board her ship and leave. Finally, once you see Samus reappear on screen for the 16th time, switch to holding right and A instead. This will let us start heading back to the original X and Y coordinates, and with any luck, put Samus back in bounds of the stage. All you have to do now is die to an enemy, and the game will respawn you at the non-existent save room on the main deck, with the Omega Metroid already dead and Samus already a hero. Oh yeah, and as for why picking save slot C is so important, well, the game's 3 save files are stored in different locations in the game's memory, and only the data stored in save slot C is physically close enough to where Samus's X and Y values are stored to be susceptible to memory corruption in the first place. The save slot you have to use is literally necessitated by its physical location in the memory. You can't make this stuff up. Needless to say, this glitch is obscenely complicated and is just as hard to execute successfully as it sounds. But it's also an incredible accomplishment, indicative of Biospark's ingenuity and love for Metroid Fusion. The memory corruption glitch is still in its relative infancy, and it's likely that more fascinating discoveries will be made with Metroid Fusion in the future, even if they aren't ones that save time. Which reminds me, if you're wondering if this technique could be used to enter a pseudo New Game Plus state to replay the game from the beginning with a fully equipped Samus, like you can do in Super Metroid, Biospark says, yep. I want to thank Biospark, obviously, for his help in this video's creation. If it weren't for the video guides on his channel, it would have taken months for me to figure out how to pull some of these high-level glitches off. I'm putting his tutorial for the memory corruption glitch in the video description. He obviously gives a much better technical explanation for how and why it works than I did in this video, so if you're interested in trying it for yourself, that's definitely the place to go. And that is the real ending to Metroid Fusion. Thanks for watching. If you're looking for a place to head next, why not check out my video on glitches in Super Metroid. As always, hope this video has been a pleasure. See you next mission.